You know? In other words, you can't have this desire towards me, and when I come out here before everybody else, you're treating me badly. So it is felt that they got back at these men because they knew that they were desirable for them. But again, it's a way of saying we are not mere commodities, we are not chattel, we are human beings. Now, you would have learned that the practice was not to allow enslaved people to read and write. Right? Again, if you allow that, you are saying that they are human beings. But some masters did allow them to learn to read and write, and especially if they were their offsprings, the colored class. Right? Even if they did not give them freedom, they gave them certain privileges. No. Some of these enslaved persons who could read and write began to petition for freedom. And I'm not talking here about just using the money they earn to manumit them, to get themselves manumitted, to buy their freedom. I'm using the case of Old Doll of Barbados, who was considered by Carl Watson, someone who wrote her story as part of the history of resistance. We call her the matriarch of the Newton plantation, a plantation in Christchurch in Barbados. She apparently had children with some white person on that estate, and the former owner woman was very kind to her. And her family expanded. Colored slaves, they were not really free. But apparently the former owner of the plantation had promised her and her children freedom at death when the owner died. You know, some planters were made provision for slaves to be freed in their wills. So when the plantation passed to some other owners, this family insisted, the family, mainly women, insisted on that freedom. And insisted on certain privileges. Some of the children even had their own slaves, as it were. And they insisted by writing letters to the new owner in England. They wrote letters and letters and letters. They would not give up until they were granted their freedom. This is something that we don't study a lot because we just assume blacks can read, blacks can write. And of course, it's very difficult sometimes to find the written evidence. And of course, so long ago, we can't give you oral history. But the case of Old Doll of Barbados on the Newton plantation is a good example of how women use their literacy skills to insist and petition for their right to be free. Beckles tells the story and gives excerpts of the letters in his book, Natural Rebels. If you can't get the Old Doll book, I have not seen the Old Doll book in Barbados, in Jamaica, but Beckles' book is available. Now, women also use their access to the white household. There, women were numerically dominant. Domestic slaves were mainly women. Of course, they had the men who were coachmen and so on. And they had this sort of intimacy with the white family of the plantation. This intimacy with the general family, because they work in the household and sleep in there and so on, and the added sexual intimacy with white men, put them in a strategic position to do harm to those white people. You could easily poison them. You cook their food, and so on. And it is said that these Africans had great knowledge of, well, we know that, we still do, of herbs, their value, medicinal value, or the value of, or the dangerous ones, the bad ones as well. And in the context of medical science, in the 17th and 18th century, it would not have been easy to find out if they were poisoned. And so that is part of the problem with the evidence is not strong. But in terms of arguments developed by historians, this position of women in that intimate context could give them access to the whites to poison them. I felt that they did. And what's the basis for saying so? When you read the primary documents, the suddenness with which some men died, you wonder if they were not really poisoned. I remember a case from the son of this woman who was a teenage young man came out, recent arrival from England, just starting to work in one of the commercial houses, and went home one evening, didn't feel so well. By the other morning, he was dead. I know that there were some serious illnesses, tropical illnesses, fevers and so on. But when you get a repeat of that type of almost sudden death, you wonder if, in fact, they were not poisoned. I said the evidence is limited, but it's strong belief that women were strategically placed to do that and had the knowledge to do it with untraceable poison, given the level of medical science of the day. You have heard of marronage. It was a persistent feature of slave society. Wherever opportunities presented itself, men and women ran away from plantations, they ran to other plantations. It might just be overnight to find a wife, to visit a wife, a girlfriend. They went to towns and sometime in the Leeward and Windward Islands in the Lesser Antilles, it was easier for them to go to other islands because of the proximity. And like on the mainland where Guyana is, they could easily go as opposed to adjoining mainland colonies, Venezuela, Suriname. They went for some time, just temporary relief from the rigors of plantation life, and sometimes never to return. We call that permanent marronage or grand marronage, as against petit marronage, which was temporary. Men are credited with being most likely to have run away from the plantation. So maroon communities were predominantly male. Though Maturin says that by 1800, women outnumber men in some maroon towns. She called these women in these towns guerrilla women in her book. Probably to suggest that they were very active as fighters, but also we could read that they were robust. It is said that while most historians say that men were people most likely to run away, because they said they were more robust, they were not constrained by pregnancy and family life, and they had the skills to survive. So women who were not pregnant, who were robust and had developed these skills could join them. Some of the women in the communities, maroon communities, were there involuntary. They were captured by maroon men to become their wives. And such women, they said, sometimes resented the men who had captured them, and sometimes would betray, because of the resentment, would betray the location. You know, the villages were hidden villages. So they would tell whites where the villages were, or sometimes even kill the men while they were sleeping. So one could argue that they were traitors, but if you look at it, the other side of it, they were forced to be there. They didn't want to be there, they were kidnapped, so that they got back at the community for that. Running away may have been the last resort for some women, especially if they were young, like Mary Prince. But she told of running away after being punished twice for the same action. She said she was given a jar to go and empty. I think it was a chamber pot, and it was already cracked. And so when she went to empty, it just fell apart. But she was beaten because of it by the mistress. When the husband came home and he was told that what had happened, he also went to beat her again. And at the time, she was milking a cow. And when he hit her, of course, her reaction caused the pail of milk and, the cow and so on. So to run away, the pail of milk to turn over. And this is what she said. My master knew that this accident was his own fault, but he was so enraged that he seemed glad of an excuse to go on with his ill usage. It beat me until I was unable to stand, and he himself